Welcome to the Lava Flow, channeling the flow of information to the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and agorist community. I'm Roger Paxton, and from the state that not only has milk as the official state beverage, but makes it legal for you to buy and sell raw milk, this is the show that will bring you the people, places, and events that everyone in the liberty movement needs to know. It's Tuesday, February 3rd, 2015, and this is episode 4, the There Ain't No Such Thing as a Free Lunch edition. And on this fortnight's episode, what's in the news with a Silk Road trial update, and yet another bad cop, or 4. Statists say the dumbest shit, featuring BlackBerry CEO Chen, and The Next Generation with busting the myth of the homeschool social problem, featuring my wife, Jessica Paxton. But first, what's Rustling My Jimmies today? There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. A simple statement that should be clear to everyone. Hell, it was even the motto of the Libertarian Party for a long time. But people just don't seem to get it. After reading and hearing many of the comments after the State of the Union address, I was just sickened to hear that almost no one gets this simple statement anymore. According to the National Taxpayers Union, the total cost of the proposals given in Obama's State of the Union address would be an increase of $41 billion a year, and not a single one of his proposals would decrease spending. With a population of 316 million people, that would increase an already ridiculous tax burden by $130 a year per person. This may not sound like much, but with almost half of Americans not paying any taxes at all to the federal government, this adds up for those of us who do. One of the most costly and controversial of Obama's proposals was, quote, to lower the cost of community college to zero, end quote. Now those among us with even a basic understanding of economics understands that this is an impossible notion. This will only serve to make community college more expensive at the cost of the taxpayer, with an estimated price tag of $60 billion over the next 10 years. When something is subsidized, the cost goes way up, and the quality goes way down. Just look at our public schools. We continue throwing money at our free public education in increasing amounts every year, only to have a flat line or worse when it comes to quality. Not to mention that if everyone has a 2-year degree, then a 2-year degree won't be worth the paper it's printed on. Already in our poor economy, a 4-year degree does little to help recent graduates find a job. In a time where half of college grads are working jobs that don't require a degree, adding more college graduates to the mix is not going to make things better. But more than just a topic in a speech given by the president, this is the systematic way of thinking of the moochers, if I may borrow a term from Ayn Rand. From free birth control to free paid leave, from free health care to free education, from free roads to free foods. They do this, they say, in the spirit of charity, helping those who can't help themselves. Penn Jillette said it best, though, when he said, "It's amazing to me how many people think that voting to have the government give poor people money is compassion. Helping poor and suffering people yourself is compassion. Voting for our government to use guns to give money to poor and suffering people is immoral, self-righteous, bullying, laziness. People do need to be fed, medicated, educated, clothed, and sheltered. If we're compassionate, we'll help them. But you get no moral credit for forcing other people to do what you think is right. There is great joy in helping people, but no joy in doing it at gunpoint. But are government handouts really the best way to help the poor? We have seen almost no change in the percentage of those in poverty since the government assumed the role of the nanny state in this country. even with spending on welfare programs skyrocketing. According to Cato, we are spending over $1 trillion a year in more than 126 separate and, of course, often overlapping programs to fight poverty. And the poverty rate actually increased to 15.1% of Americans in 2012, falling slightly to 14.5% in 2013. Despite nearly $15 trillion spent in total welfare costs since Lyndon Johnson declared war on poverty in 1964, our poverty rate is nearly identical to what it was 40 years ago. Exactly like the war on drugs, the war on poverty has been a dismal failure. Should we continue to rely on government to provide expensive measures to fix problems that don't get better, no matter how much money you throw at them? Or should we, as Penn Jillette recommended, have true compassion? The best way to combat this government spending and overreach is to show people that it doesn't work, and show them solutions that do work. The first part of this is education. We must educate at every opportunity. If you see a friend or family member on social media calling for more handouts, call them out on it. Remember that people who are advocating for stealing more money from you for their pet projects are moochers. Tell them that, in as nice a way as possible, of course. Tell them that they do not get bonus points for stealing from you to give to charity. Ask them if it would be okay for you to come over to their house, hold a gun to their head, steal money from them, and give it to your pet project. When they say no, tell them that it is also immoral for a group of people to do the same. And even worse, for a group of people to vote for other people who will then tell other people to come to your house with guns to steal money from you. Remember, most people have not ever been introduced to this way of thinking. At first, people are going to call you a monster, telling you that you don't care about the poor, the uneducated, or whatever group of people they think they care about. And most of these people will never understand. But eventually, one day, many of them will. And the more that do understand, the more people they will in turn bring to understand, until there is real change. Larkin Rose, author of The Most Dangerous Superstition, took an unscientific poll of his nearly 5,000 Facebook followers a few weeks ago. And it shows an exponential increase in the number of people who call themselves anarchists every year based on what year they became an anarchist. The vast majority have made the change sometime since 2012, including yours truly. This means that something we are doing is working, and I believe this is due primarily to the education that is happening on a regular basis as people become more bold in their stance of anti-statism. There are many solutions to these problems that actually do work. If your pet project is taking care of the poor, then give to private charities that take good care of the money given to them and make sure that the vast majority of their dollars go to the poor. If you're passionate about education, homeschool your children and help set up homeschool groups in your area. Tutor children who are having problems in public school. Whatever your pet project is, there's bound to be a charity that is much more effective than a government handout. Find that charity and give to it. Or even better, work for it. Together we can all make a real difference in the lives of people and show them that government is not the answer to their problems. It is the problem. The state of our union is doomed, and I hope you will help me in bringing it down.
This week in the news.
Week 2 of the Silk Road trial completed this week, and things aren't looking good for the defense. A special agent with the U.S. Internal Revenue Service gave evidence linking Ross Ulbricht, the alleged Dread Pirate Roberts and founder of the Silk Road, to accounts on forums where he advertised Silk Road as, quote, an Amazon.com for drugs. Ulbricht also allegedly used his own personal Gmail address to search for an IT pro to help with the Silk Road. Agents also found more than 144,000 bitcoins on Ulbricht's computer, worth between $16 and $18 million at the time of his arrest. It's also been alleged that Ulbricht tried to arrange for as many as 6 people to be killed in murder-for-hire schemes. Unfortunately for Ulbricht, the contract killers he tried to hire were undercover agents. The defense team tried to block testimony on these murder-for-hire allegations since he was not being tried for that, but the judge allowed the evidence to help establish that Ulbricht is actually the Dread Pirate Roberts. In another massive blow to the defense, the judge declared much of the evidence presented by Ulbricht's attorney inadmissible because it was mainly composed of hearsay and supposition by government witnesses. Joshua Dreidel, Ulbricht's attorney, claimed this decision completely eviscerated his defense strategy. As early as next week, when the prosecution rests, Dreidel is expected to argue that, while Ulbricht admittedly created Silk Road, he later handed control of it over to another party, who was the real Dread Pirate Roberts. If Ulbricht loses this case, this will have serious repercussions for the Internet. As we discussed on Episode 3 of The Lava Flow, any site, such as Facebook or Gmail, that allows people to communicate with each other could be affected if those communications are used for illegal purposes. Dreidel is also expected to argue that Ulbricht was nothing more than a landlord, and therefore is not responsible for his tenants' criminal activity. Quote, analogously, no landlord has been prosecuted under the Federal Controlled Substances Statute for renting an apartment to a known drug seller, end quote, Dreidel said. In other news, notorious torrent site The Pirate Bay is back online after a December police raid that shut it down. The site, which allows users to download television shows, movies, games, and other files, has been down for 7 weeks. An image of a phoenix is now in the place of its trademark pirate ship logo. The new site appears to have the entire database of the old site, with the last shown torrent uploaded having a date of December 9th, the day that it was taken offline. In Let Them Eat Cake news this week, what is being dubbed as Cake Wars 2 happened to a Denver bakery after it refused to decorate a cake with an anti-gay message. Obviously, this is no accident. This is clearly in response to a Colorado judge finding that a different bakery violated a civil rights law by refusing to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple. Since we all apparently have a civil right to force someone to bake a cake for us, this could get pretty messy. Many, of course, are making this an issue about gay marriage, but it's not. It's an issue about free association. When you force people to cater to people they do not wish to cater to, this is what happens. Should a black baker be required to serve a KKK customer? Or should an anti-Islamic owner of a gun range be required to allow Muslims to shoot there? Of course not. While there is really a gun range in my state right now refusing service to Muslims, they should absolutely be allowed that right, just as much as I should be allowed to allow or not allow anyone I choose on my own personal property. There are 2 fabulous libertarian events coming up in the next couple of months that you should attend if you are in any way able to do so. First, from February 24th to March 1st, Anarcho is happening in Acapulco, Mexico. Jeff Berwick of the Anarcho-capitalist podcast is putting this event together, and he had this to say about it. Anarcho is the first international anarcho-capitalist conference of its type and will be held in the freest city in North America, Acapulco, Mexico, from February 24th to March 1st, 2015, at the Copacabana Hotel on the beach. Our vision is to take freedom and anarchy to the next level, and that means holding events in much freer areas like Acapulco. The event will be a mix of music, speakers, panels, parties, and educational opportunities, including an entrepreneurship boot camp hosted by Exosphere to help prepare the next generation of ANCAPs, Luke Rudkowski's Change Media University, and Dana Martin's workshop on peaceful parenting and unschooling. Already confirmed is anarchist rapper Rob Hustle, famous for his track, This Is What Happens When You Call the Cops. Libertarian songbird Tatiana Moroz, Nima V., and countless other artists and cutting-edge anarchist speakers and activists. Topics covered will include anarchism, entrepreneurism, expatriation, investing, Austrian economics, precious metals, Bitcoin, other cryptocurrencies, decentralization of the internet, and much, much more. You can find out more information on Anarcho at the website anarchopoco.com. That's ANARCHAPULCO.com. March 5th through March 8th is the 2015 New Hampshire Liberty Forum, brought to you by the Free State Project in Manchester, New Hampshire. Keynote speakers this year include Patrick Byrne, CEO and chairman of Overstock.com, Jeffrey Tucker, founder and CEO of Liberty.me, and Ben Swan, Emmy Award winner and primetime reporter. Other speakers include David Boaz, Walter Block, Sheriff Mack, and Lynn Ulbricht, mother of the alleged Dread Pirate Roberts, Ross Ulbricht. If Ross is out of prison by then, even he'll be a speaker at New Hampshire Liberty Forum. With workshops in art, nonviolent communication, entrepreneurship, and others, along with 24 speakers and other events, this is sure to be one you don't want to miss. You can read all about it and register at nhlibertyforum.com.
This is what happens when you call the cops. Say what? This is what happens when you call the cops. Come on. This is what happens when you call the cops. You get your rights violated or you all get shot. This is what happens when you call.
It is always helpful to me when reading police abuse cases to think about what would happen to the average citizen if they did the things that these officers did. Always keep in mind that a badge in no way grants extra rights. So why is it that these officers are able to get away with such abuses of justice? 69-year-old William Wingate finally received an apology for being falsely arrested 8 months after the incident. In July of last year, he was arrested by Seattle police officer Cynthia Whitlatch for the egregious and violent act of swinging a golf club at her while she was driving by in her patrol car. Never mind that the dash cam video clearly shows that he never swung the club at her, or the fact that he had been walking these same streets with this golf club repurposed into a cane for over 20 years. He was arrested for obstruction and harassment by Officer Whitlatch. After a former Washington state representative finally got involved in the case, the Seattle Police Department deputy chief personally met with Wingate, returned his cane, and offered an apology for his arrest. Officer Whitlatch received counseling from her supervisor, a course of action deemed by the department, quote, to be an appropriate resolution. Now she's free to harass even more elderly men minding their own business. In Kake, Alaska, a public safety officer tased an 11-year-old boy because the boy asked what it felt like to get shocked by the device. The mother of the 11-year-old boy was not even informed about the incident by police. She was out of town at the time of the incident, and her son was afraid to tell her because he thought he would get in trouble. Her knowledge of the incident came a month later when a neighbor stopped to ask her how her son was doing after he was tased. Quote, she was asking me how my son was doing after the incident, and I was like, what is she talking about? I was in shock because, I didn't hear of it. I did not know anything about it, Ward said, recalling the conversation when she had learned of the attack. Public safety officers in Alaska are basically cops in every way aside from the fact that they're not sworn in and they're not allowed to carry firearms while on duty. Public safety officers are used by police departments to patrol remote areas that they can't afford to staff with better paid officers. Currently, public safety officers are not authorized to carry firearms while on duty, but that's soon to change due to new legislation that passed last year. All I can say is that it's a good thing that this kid didn't wait until public safety officers will be carrying guns and asked what it felt like to be shot. San Francisco public defender Jamie Tillotson was arrested on Tuesday outside a courtroom in the city's Hall of Justice after officers say she interfered with a police investigation and resisted arrest. Tillotson says she was only advising her client of his right not to be questioned without an attorney present. In video taken by another lawyer on the scene, it is clear that Tillotson in no way resisted arrest. She was left handcuffed to a wall for an hour while police questioned and photographed her client without her present. She was then released. Quote, it was very clear to me that I hadn't been doing anything illegal. I was challenging him, telling him that you know that I did not violate the law. He moved it forward, said Jamie Tillotson at Wednesday's press conference. Public defender Jeff Adachi is calling for police to be held accountable for Tillotson's arrest and said, quote, a uniform does not give anyone license to bully people out of their constitutional rights. If police are able to do this to a deputy public defender in front of her client, I can only imagine what is happening out on the streets. And in Key West, Florida, where 61-year-old Charles Eimers was killed by police officers on Thanksgiving Day in 2013, the city of Key West has finally agreed to settle the case with the family for $900,000. In the incident, Eimers fled from officers in his PT Cruiser, eventually stopping a few blocks away and getting out of his vehicle. The officers claimed in the police report that Eimers resisted the officers, quote, with violence. But other officers on the scene told paramedics an entirely different story. Paramedics were told that Eimers left his vehicle and ran, then collapsed on the beach. he never regained consciousness. However, video taken during the incident by a bystander with a cell phone shows that both of these stories are complete lies. This video, released 2 weeks after the incident, shows Eimers walking away from his car and voluntarily and slowly lowering himself to the ground to surrender to several police officers, who then piled on top of him in a very violent manner. The autopsy showed Eimers had 10 fractured ribs, bruises and abrasions, and red neurons in his brain from lack of oxygen. His trachea was also abnormally red, and his lungs showed tissue damage. This autopsy, along with a video showing the entire incident, make it clear that Eimers was killed by police officers. Another video, released in this case, showed one of the involved officers, Officer Levitt, bragging about killing Eimers, saying, "We killed him so you don't have to worry about it," and "I dropped a fucking bomb on his head." Levitt was also recorded saying, "I tased a motherfucker in custody today and I don't care." The officer was unaware that he was being recorded at the time, of course. Officer Levitt was the only officer punished, and he received a vacation of 5 days unpaid leave for killing another man. And finally, New York City is being forced to pay $3.9 million to the family of Ramarley Graham, an 18-year-old Bronx teenager who was shot to death by an officer in 2012. He was killed in the bathroom of his grandmother's apartment while flushing marijuana down the toilet. He was unarmed when shot, and no guns were found anywhere in the apartment. Graham's grandmother and 6-year-old brother were in the house at the time of the shooting. This comes just weeks after it's been reported that New York City is seeking to settle the $75 million lawsuit brought by the family of Eric Garner, who died after being placed in a chokehold by NYPD officers. Eventually, taxpayers are going to have enough of being on the hook for the misadventures of rogue cops and say enough is enough.
If it's a legitimate rape, female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
I've now been in 57 states. I think one left to go.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Well, I'm not a crook.
I know the human being and fish can coexist peacefully.
Yes, it is a slippery slope indeed. And for you so-called libertarians who have called for net neutrality, this is the beast that you are feeding. BlackBerry CEO John Chen wrote a blog post on the BlackBerry website based on a letter that he sent to several members of Congress. In this post, he claims that it is, quote, discriminatory that there are more applications available on the Apple iOS and Android smartphones than there are for BlackBerry and Windows phones. So much so that he wants legislators to widen the definition of net neutrality to include application neutrality. This would mean that any time an application is made for iOS and Android, that same application must have another version made for BlackBerry, Microsoft, and all other operating systems as well. This is insanity, folks, and this is why you never feed the beast of government no matter the cause. Chen said, unfortunately, not all content and application providers have embraced openness and neutrality. Unlike BlackBerry, which allows iPhone users to download and use our BBM service, Apple does not allow BlackBerry or Android users to download Apple's iMessage messaging service. Netflix, which has forcefully advocated for carrier neutrality, has discriminated against BlackBerry customers by refusing to make its streaming movie service available to them. Many other applications providers similarly offer service only to iPhone and Android users. This dynamic has created a two-tiered wireless broadband ecosystem in which iPhone and Android users are able to access far more content and applications than customers using devices running other operating systems. These are precisely the sort of discriminatory practices that neutrality advocates have criticized at the carrier level. Therefore, net neutrality must be mandated at the application and content layer if we truly want a free, open, and non-discriminatory internet. All wireless broadband customers must have the ability to access any lawful applications and content they choose, and applications content providers must be prohibited from discriminating based on a customer's mobile operating system. Well, that's a mouthful, folks. BlackBerry had its heyday, and it didn't scream for more fairness back then, so why are they screaming now? Of course, this is all the invisible hand at work. Because applications developers generally only make applications for products where they will see a profit, they usually only make applications for Apple and Android. With the low number of users on Windows and BlackBerry devices today, the chance of making a profit on these platforms is much smaller. Instead of focusing on the last thing a tech company should be focusing on, getting help from the government, he should be focusing on making his company make products that are more innovative and more relevant to today's customers. Many companies have suffered from similar fates in the past when they couldn't keep up with technology, as BlackBerry is today. Kodak is one, having to file for bankruptcy in 2011 and selling off many of its patents due to mass transition to digital photography. Western Union is another, who in 2006 had to shut down its telegram service due to email emerging as a faster and easier way to send text long distance. Apple itself had to completely restructure after crippling financial losses in the late 90s due to the popularity of Microsoft. Even Android struggled for a time because the Apple iOS was dominating and much easier to develop apps for due to its standardization. And, of course, if it weren't being propped up by government financing, the United States Postal Service would have gone the way of Western Union and the dodo bird years ago. Very few people would be sad to see the BlackBerry disappear, but I doubt we've seen the last of this issue. As CEO Chen said in his blog post, President Obama, Prime Minister Cameron, Chancellor Merkel, NATO, the U.S. Department of Defense, and members of Congress rely on our high-security, end-to-end, secure communications network to protect their most sensitive communications. With so many powerful people relying on BlackBerry, I imagine it will end up being more like the USPS than Western Union.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control.
Hi, Lavas. I'm Jessica Paxton, chairman of the Libertarian Party of Arkansas, a homeschooling mom, and the better half of your illustrious host. If you listened to episode 1, you may remember Roger's comments on homeschooling, that it's one of the most important ways you can live a Lava lifestyle in a statist society. Taking our children out of state-run, mind-numbing, brainwashing public schools is a huge step towards smashing the state. Can you imagine? If every Lava out there were to homeschool their children, what an impact we could make in one generation. A new generation of adults who'd been taught to think critically, to question authority, to always seek more knowledge, how to debate, how to live peacefully, and how to influence others to do the same. As a homeschooling family, we strive to instill these values in our children, values that they would certainly not acquire from a public school setting. When I hear from others who would love to homeschool their children, the first, "But what about," I always hear is the dreaded S word, socializing. Now, bear with me if you will. Think about how you feel when some statist asks you the question. Yeah, that one. But who will build the roads? Now think, if you will, of how hard your eyes roll at the sound of, "But what about my roads?" That is exactly how homeschoolers feel when someone says, "But social skills." I'm going to ask you to think back again. Think back to your elementary and middle school days. Did your name end up written on the board most days? Or did you often receive that dreaded check mark that indicated you broke yet another rule? What was the rule you most often broke? If you're like most children, your name ended up on the board because you dared to talk in class. It's all coming back to you now. No talking in class. Sit still, shut up, and listen. But don't you dare question the watered-down or incorrect information I'll test you on later. But that's okay, right? Because there's plenty of other time to socialize, right? Okay, well, let's head to the lunchroom, where you'll stand in line, and you'd better do that quietly, by the way, or that check mark may appear by your name on the board. You trudge through the lunch line, or handed a tray of slop and head to your table, where you'll have to sit quietly and use your 15 remaining minutes to scarf down your swill. And you'd better do it without gagging, because puking is surely checkmark-worthy, inciting a riot and all. Cafeteria monitors trudge from one corner of the room to another, throwing that side eye, and doing the point your finger over lips maneuver to remind you that lunchtime is for eating, not talking. Okay, so there's no quality social time here, so let's go to recess. You remember recess, right? That place where bullies rule the roost and cliques exist to make you feel inadequate and worthless. The place where the weak kid is always picked last for kickball and the humiliation of not being physically coordinated can land you in the pits of social despair for the rest of your school career? Yeah, that place. Being stuck in a fenced-in play area where all of the good stuff has been tossed because of insurance and lawsuits, where you're picked on, trodden on, and made fun of, where you're only allowed to fraternize with people of your own age for 30 minutes 3 times a week. Well, that's quality social time right there. Or is it? Now let's take a homeschool kid of the same age. We're going to play a day in the life of a typical Tuesday in the Paxton house. We homeschool 2 boys who are 6 and 8 years old. Now, we aren't the traditional sit at the table and do workbooks kind of homeschoolers, so don't think that I left that part out. Our philosophy is more learn through life, but that's a segment for another day. So on a typical Tuesday morning, the kids wake up whenever they feel like, which is usually around 7 a.m. There are no 5 a.m. alarms or frostbite from waiting for the bus in the dark around here. We have 2 hours until we leave for the day, so the Kindles, Xbox, and computer take up most of that time. At 9 a.m., we head to Memphis, which is about half an hour down the road, for our weekly co-op class. This class is a 2-hour-long enrichment session in which the moms take turns teaching various sessions that range from creative theater to chess to world geography and even mock trial. We always arrive half an hour early because that is the kids' favorite part. 30 glorious minutes to run around the gym playing whatever game they've created with kids from age 1 to 18. It's not uncommon to see the 14-year-olds playing tag with the 6-year-olds, or for the 4-year-olds to play duck, duck, goose with the tweens. In our beautiful little secular homeschooling group, there are no outsiders. No one is the weird kid, even though every kid is weirdly, wonderfully unique. No one is bullied. No one's left out. These kids all have a natural appreciation for everyone, regardless of age or status. They spend their social time, get this, actually socializing. With moms, with friends, with the new kid. That doesn't happen on a public school playground. After our 2-hour class time is over, everyone packs up their lunch and we have an hour to eat. It's an hour of beautifully loud social time for us all. The moms soak up each other's company and the kids enjoy rounds of joke telling and fart noise making while eating their lunch, and then everyone helps clean up and put away tables before we head off for the rest of our day. Now, if you're keeping count, we're up to an hour and a half of quality social time, and it's only 1 p.m. That's as much recess as a public school kid may get all week long. Now, after lunch, about half of our little group will load up in their cars and head to other extracurricular activities like karate, mad science, math club, or horseback riding lessons. But those of us without afternoon obligations head to a restaurant a few miles down the road for, you guessed it, social time. The moms sit and chat while our kids spend the next 2 hours running around the play area, creating games, chatting, building forts, drawing blueprints for a clubhouse, or creating an act for an upcoming talent show. Kids of all ages socializing in ways they never could in public school. It's now 3 p.m. Time for school kids to catch the bus back home. If those kids are lucky, they've had half an hour of quality social time today, while our little band of homeschoolers have racked up more than 3 hours. In the real world, our social circles aren't only made up of people our same age and academic level, and homeschool kids get more practical practice than public school kids could ever hope for. And that's only Tuesday. If you're interested in a more in-depth look at homeschooling and socializing, I highly recommend the book, The Well-Adjusted Child, The Social Benefits of Homeschooling. You can find a link in the show notes.
Thank you, Jess, for that awesome segment on homeschooling. Also, thank you all for listening to the show this week. And thanks again to Sheltered Life for letting me use their music in the show. For the show notes to this episode, where I put links to everything that's been talked about on the show this week, you can go to thelavaflow.com/4. And please, subscribe to us on iTunes at thelavaflow.com/iTunes. And like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And if you like what you hear on the show, leave us a bit of feedback. You can also send us feedback by going to thelavaflow.com/contact. In a few episodes, I'll be starting a segment called Ask Me Anything, where I take your questions from Facebook, Twitter, and email and attempt to answer them on the show. You can email askmeanything at thelavaflow.com, and I'll pick a couple of questions to answer each show. If you're having or know of a libertarian event coming up, send me an email to events@thelavaflow.com, and I'll be sure to talk about it on the show. And most importantly, if you like what this show gives you and you want to hear more of it, and to keep this show ad-free, please go and exercise your free market muscles by going to thelavaflow.com/support and giving a per-episode donation of as little as $1 an episode using Patreon. There are monthly costs associated with doing this show, and there's equipment and many other things I need to get to continue making this show better every episode. If you don't want to use Federal Reserve notes, then donate with Bitcoin also at thelavaflow.com/support. Help the Lava Flow become fiscally neutral. Until next time, keep striking the root.
This has been a Pax Libertas Productions podcast.